Hi everyone, my name is Mr. Anderson and I am mean to people on the internet. I'm always very polite about it though, I just tend to ask difficult questions and insist on the answers. It's probably kind of an occupational hazard because I am in fact a lawyer. On my channel you'll find a lot of debate breakdowns, debate analysis, and technique videos about how to adapt cross-examination, tricks and tactics and techniques. I like technique better than trick and tactic. Uh, to use in debates and to use in your own arguments in order to force, the reluctant and obstreperous to face the truth. Today we're going to be looking at a debate that I had recently with a guy named JimBob. Now, JimBob is another presupper, and that is a presuppositionalist. These are usually fundamentalist Christians that believe that unless you believe in God, that you can't know anything, and that they can know things, but that you can't. And they also typically like to try and be kind of internet bullies and kind of push people around because they often understand philosophy like slightly better than most people who are focused in the hard sciences. Um, and so that's kind of the way they are, and this guy's sort of no exception. Um, as I say, I mean, I try and always treat people cordially, and I hope to treat this person cordially in our interactions going forward. Hopefully, this video isn't going to sour that. But Jim Bob has this pet argument that, in fact, knowledge is impossible in the event that you believe that the world is materialistic, which I think is probably not true. I've kind of set out to demonstrate that to him in this video. So let's watch it together, and I'll jump in and out to help break it down for you.
I think you framed it this way in a different debate. It was like, let's say that there's two people, and each one has a different, mechanistically arrived at, view of reality, right? They believe two contradictory things, and it's like, well, you can't really go and get a third. You can't resolve that without just going to a third mind and then asking that mind what it thinks, and then you can't, and that doesn't help. You just get another one and another one, and it doesn't really matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except that's not really true.
Well,
Because,
if
let's say, go ahead.
I'm just saying, by just saying it's not really true, are you going now outside of the deterministic mechanistic view to evaluate whether that's true or not? I mean, you're stuck in the system, right?
I'll tell you how, from a deterministic perspective, we can determine whether or not one of those two ideas is true.
Okay.
So let's make this a concrete example, okay? There's guy A and guy B. Neither one of those are you and me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And guy A and guy B, guy A thinks that he can beat the crap out of guy B, and guy B thinks that he can't and that he would beat the crap out of guy A, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they both arrived at those propositions through deterministic mechanisms, purely as a result of the law of physics, and there's no true mind in there that's the result of those determinisms, right? And so it's like, well, how can we determine whether or not, in fact, what guy A knows is true, or guy B knows is true? And the answer is guy B could beat the shit out of guy A. And they would know. Both of them would know that, in fact, the proposition that I can beat you up is not true because I just got the tar beat out of me.
No.
And my proposition just met cold, hard reality. And I got new information, new deterministic stimulus, right? This is how we know that it is possible for us to have, like,
who is the third observer?
I don't even need a third observer. Right?
Oh, really?
Guy B can change guy A's mind about whether or not guy B can beat him up by going and beating.
No. Right? Who's the observer then?
Pick one. Do you want it to be guy A? Sure, let's make it guy A.
It doesn't matter.
Guy A is the observer. It doesn't matter. So guy A is the observer. Guy A has a belief, right? A proposition that is based on his deterministic, right? Everything he knows about the universe. I have a yellow belt in, karate, and I lift weights once every 3 months, right? And so he thinks, I can beat up guy B, right? Uh-huh. And then guy B's like, I don't think that's true. Guy A says, well,
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm. Now A gets the tar beat out of it. Now
Right.
guy A knows that his purple belt or yellow belt or whatever I said in karate didn't help him, right? He has new information,
Oh, you
and now
mean
he
did
knows his
so
proposition
did
isn't
he
true. He
so
has
the
new
way okay, hold
knowledge.
on. You said new information. So was the
Well,
way in
new
which
stimulus, new
sense
input.
data. Yeah, sense data. Yeah. So
Sure.
the way in which he engaged and evaluate with the new sense data, was that determined?
It was all determined.
Okay,
But
so
then
now
he
we're
got
back in the
new
same problem.
sense data.
No,
We're not
no,
in the,
yeah,
he's
we
got
are.
a new sense
Dude,
data.
listen, dude, the thing in question is evaluation.
But there is no evaluation in this
You,
situation.
no, there is.
Like,
Hold on.
yeah.
There is. Is he not evaluating new sense data?
Yeah, he's evaluating new sense data, but the question was not, can I accurately evaluate sense data? The question is, can I test whether my propositions are true? And I think it's fairly clear here that when we have two dueling propositions, if we turn those dueling propositions into dueling people, that they can resort to cold, hard reality, and that we can find out who's right, who's stronger in this case. Although I think this could apply to anything, right? It could be who's right about, whether or not a rocket's going to explode. Fire off the rocket. Then cold, hard reality will tell you who's right. And that's not really a question of sense data. That's a question of testing your propositions, right? It doesn't have anything to do with sense data at all. He's now essentially he is, and this is alluding to something that's going to happen very clearly later. He is retreating to solipsism. That is, he is retreating to the matrix world. The idea that you can't know anything because you might just be a brain in a jar. And I mean, if that's where he's going to go, like that's kind of the last bastion of guys who like to run from me.
So you set up a system where two people had contradictory propositions, and you said there's a way to, from determinism, to determine whether or not the propositions, the truth of the matter is accessible. And you said they have a fight, and there's an outcome, and then both people or one, right, evaluate new sense data. That's the thing in question.
What's the thing in question? The question.
Their evaluation of sense data.
So you're saying like that? You're saying I'm okay. Well, then that doesn't.
There's
then,
new
then
sense data. There's
your
new
problem
sense
with your
data.
arguments. You're saying
No, there's
the
new
sense
sense data.
I just want to reemphasize this because this is the reason that you'll see I'm confused, because this conversation is about whether or not free will is required in order to know anything. It's not about whether or not your senses are reliable at all. And now suddenly, because that argument has basically been taken out behind the barn and shot, suddenly this has always been about sense data, which is very interesting, isn't it?
Okay, so
There's
you know
new
what?
sense data. You
I
understand? You understand?
I think I
You
understand. Here's
understand?
what I understand. I think what you're saying is that there is such a thing as a stubborn mule who, no matter how much information he's given, no matter how badly somebody beats him up or in an
Nope,
argument, or
that's
whatever,
not my argument.
he won't change his opinion.
Nope,
For that
that's
person, that
nope.
person can't get new
No,
knowledge.
that's
If
not.
that's what you're saying, then I
Nope.
agree with you.
Nope, that's not what I'm saying. You just fundamentally
No?
changed the whole thing. No, what I'm saying is
I mean, how is it not?
You're not gonna let me
knowledge
say.
with new sense data. Go ahead.
because that appeals to the thing. You're assuming they have knowledge of the sense data, which means their evaluation of the new sense data is accurate, which
So
requires a mind, to independently evaluate the new sense data, right? And come to a new proposition about the sense data. Yes, there's no way around it.
There is. Here's an example. So, because, I mean, if the mind is an illusion, right, and there is no evaluative function to the mind other than mechanistic determinations, then we can still have conditioned responses which result in new behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Now he cuts me off here, and that's okay because we were going to be coming back around to this, but then you'll find later that he actually just sort of shuts the chat down and kicks me off, so I don't get to make this point. But essentially, truth-finding machines, if you will. I mean, if you look at a blade of grass that is essentially constantly checking to see whether or not it is facing the sun, and as long as that's true, it stays where it is, and then when the sun moves and it's no longer true, then it has a conditioned response and it will turn to face the sun so that that blade of grass is always facing the sun. And so it's finding truth, and it's doing that without consciousness. And we see that sort of thing all across the animal kingdom, and in fact, all across the tree of life. And so the argument is that, maybe our brains are a little more sophisticated, but they're basically doing the same thing. And that means that they can find truth. And if they can find truth, then they can create knowledge by acquiring more truth. That's kind of it, man.
The question I'm asking is, how do you determine the distinction between pure reactivity to stimuli and conscious, meaningful evaluation?
Well, what I'm saying is that from a materialist perspective, there isn't one.
I know, me too. It's not coherent.
No, it is coherent, and it still means that even if I have a person, like even if I have no control over the decisions that I make, I can still learn things and know things.
That's question begging. Yeah, that's question begging. Of course it is.
No,
Does it seem like his mic is turned up like way higher than mine? Like, I know that my mic is fine because I've been on many other channels and like the sounds are equalized, but his mic, like his voice seems way louder than mine. And I don't know whether that's just an artifact of, whether it's benign or whether he's kind of turned himself up so it's easier for him to talk over me. But I guess that's one of the dangers of, debating on somebody else's channel. But of course, we're in my channel now, so allow me to pontificate a little bit about what I think about this whole thing. Ready? It's not question begging, JimBob, like it or not, because I can create truth by acquiring new sensory data, and I can evaluate that truth based on my conditioned responses, which means that as my senses gather information, I'm gathering knowledge. And so that means that I can possess knowledge, and I can do that whether or not I have a true consciousness or whether consciousness is just an illusion.
Yes, it is.
You're special pleading is what's going on.
No, you're actually special pleading now. You're saying that there's this other outcome to input response called knowing. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that one of the outcomes of input response is memory. And
is that an experience? Do we get to decide what we know or not?
In this example, no. You don't get to decide what you know or not.
So then it's a strict. So then, no. No, I know it because I know it. You sound like Professor Plink. You sound like Professor Plink now. I know because I know.
Sounds very beautiful, so I'm sure that that's a compliment. I don't know, but
no. The problem. Let's make it more stripped down and not grant yourself all of these nice descriptions of reality like boxing and stuff.
Okay.
Mechanism. Hold on. Don't interrupt. Let me do it. Mechanism A, you call a brain. They don't have a name. Forget all that. Mechanism A, brain A, makes a proposition. Brain B makes a proposition. Now, we're going to grant a third brain that's the selector of the two in this scenario. Brain A makes a proposition, what you call a proposition.
So now JimBob very much doesn't like my concrete example because it's straightforward and easy to understand it. It makes it fairly obvious that your argument simply doesn't work because you forgot about the most obvious way of checking to see whether somebody's right. We resort to concrete, cold, hard reality. So now he's trying to make it abstract and, I don't know, to make it confusing, but we're just going to get back to the same place, my friend.
Position, utterance. Brain B does it, and now selector C. What mechanism do they use? Right, brain C, to determine the truthfulness or the incompatibility between mechanism A's utterance and mechanism B's utterance. If mechanism C, the selector, everything they're about to do in evaluation and trying to reason is also just another determined utterance by physics.
There's three ways.
Just give me one.
One of them is conflict. We've talked about it, right?
That's not a mechanism.
Well, it sure as heck is. It is a mechanism of dispute resolution.
No, we're not talking about.
If I have a contradictory idea to you and we have conflict about it, then that can resolve that can resolve the dispute.
So you mean a mind is required to independently evaluate two different conflicts? How do you identify a conflict?
Why would a brain be required? If you
How do you identify a conflict? How do you identify a conflict? I'm not talking about dying. Again, I just said there's two brains that have contradictory views, or compatible or incompatible. We didn't determine what they are. You skipped to boxing again.
Are those brains connected to physical somethings that can physically interact? Can these two brains physically interact?
No, they're just making logical assumptions.
Okay, well then you can't physically resolve a dispute if you're not.
I didn't ask if you.
Physically.
Oh my God, dude! I didn't ask if you can physically resolve a dispute.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm saying that. I know you're not saying that.
No,
I'm saying
you did. I just presented. No, I just presented something. You just totally
your problem.
You just no. The resolution to whether one proposition is correct or not is not always who can win physically. Are you kidding me?
But it sometimes is.
I'm not asking about. No, I said for the sake of not granting you boxing, right?
I think the problem here is that JimBob is trying to conflate my example where I'm saying, look, we're referencing reality because in this situation, if we're disagreeing about who is stronger and we fight, then you know. And he's saying, well, what you're saying is that, if you disagree with me, you can just beat me up. And I mean, yes, also I could, but that's not really like a method of knowing whether something is true. That's just, I beat you up. The thing here is that referencing reality allows us to access truth. That's his big problem here.
I'm saying two propositions about reality, two propositions about reality, not about boxing. About anything.
Right.
Two brains make statements. I didn't even determine they were in conflict or not. You're able to determine whether they're compatible or incompatible, not whether or not they can be resolved through physicality. I'm asking you, just evaluating two statements uttered from two different determined mechanistic brains. I'm granting a third one is the selector of the two. I asked you, what methodology do you have from a materialist, physicalist view to determine which of the compatibility or incompatibility between the two statements from the two independent objects we call brains?
Just in case anybody was wondering, the other two major mechanisms are intersubjectivity. That is, you do agree to reference other brains, and you use those to test the veracity of your arguments, because essentially the idea is that if we're all truth-seeking machines, but we're imperfect truth-seeking machines, then you can use the larger number of truth-seeking machines to check to see whether or not your process is working right, because you check it against those other processes. I mean, that's the kind of fancy way of saying it, right? But like basically what I'm saying is that sometimes a way to resolve an argument when two people disagree is that you find a judge, a dispassionate decision maker, and that person resolves the argument. And the other way is that you negotiate. That is, you compare your ideas and you examine them and you try and convince each other. And, that does also allow you to find truth, because what you're doing then is you're introducing new information. And so if we're all deterministic, then my deterministic insides can go and they can influence your deterministic insides. And I can change your mind. And that may be deterministic, or it might be free will, but either way, it happens. And when you learn something new, deterministic or not, that's knowledge, man. That's it.
What's the mechanism?
Okay. So in the real world, right, there are three basic mechanisms. One is conflict, right, where, as a third mind, I let the two fight, right? And that can be, it could be directly.
Dude! If someone,
I don't have a guy.
If someone says, this dude, holy shit! If someone says some truth statement about it,
so this is kind of, I don't know, I don't really love this tactic by him where he pushes this button and he's got like a pre-recorded scream thing that screams at you to try and throw you off. But look, man, I don't rattle. So, I'm just going to scream back at you. I don't have a button, but, this is just another example of, keep your cool, meet force with force, be polite when you can, and stand up for yourself otherwise.
A tree and another person says a truth statement about a tree and one of them is right or wrong. Fighting doesn't determine who's right.
It determines who's left.
That's very quick witted,
right?
But no, we're not talking about who wins by force. We're talking about who's correct. No, we're not. This is nonsense.
Well, so I mean, like,
if you're not going to engage with the argument, there's nothing else to do here.
Let's talk about the other two then. So the other two things are, so conflict can be, it can be an element of, like,
correct, David.
We could go and we could test in reality, right? So like let's say the two statements were, I hold my pen up, if I let it go, the pen is going to fall, right? And you say, and guy B says, if you let it go, the pen is not going to fall, and we could just let it go. And whatever happens, right? So there's a reference to an objective reality. That's one way to resolve the issue, right?
No, hold on. Okay. Now let's look at that. No. Let's stick with that one.
Okay.
You just said the methodology is someone says I'm going to drop the pen, someone says it's not going to fall, someone says it's going to fall. The methodology is referencing reality. And I'm saying, what's the mechanism for referencing reality?
So now we're going back into solipsism then.
Oh,
now what you're arguing with me is that I can't trust my senses. The mechanism for referencing reality is my senses. So when we had this conversation, I was assuming that you were granting me the reliability of my senses. Are you not granting me that?
No, because that's an evaluation. You need evaluation to interact with your senses.
The reality of my senses, then you can't know anything. So I don't care what you
Thank you. So materialism is false then. So you can't have knowledge. Thank you for
because you're saying that I didn't retreat to solipsism, you did.
You said knowledge is possible from a deterministic, mechanistic universe, and you just ended your own argument.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Yours.
If it's true, how can you trust? No, I'm not making the argument for solipsism. I'm doing an internal critique of your view.
Can I trust my senses?
What mechanism? No, I'm not making up.
Can I trust my senses?
All right, I can't. If he's going to keep interrupting, it's really simple, dude. It's really simple.
So at this point, JimBob decides that this conversation is over, or actually he decides it's not over. He decides that he doesn't want to have an opponent anymore, and that he'd like to try and repair his argument, on his own, sort of in lecture format. And I actually stayed on and just sort of, shook my head when he was saying things that were particularly disagreeable. And then he actually let me come back on, and we had more of a conversation. But I think this is probably a good point to leave it for this video, and maybe I'll make some more commentary with respect to some of the other portions of the conversation later. Anyways, to JimBob, thanks very much for the conversation, and I look forward to conversing with you again.